Some folks venture out to enjoy nature. Others plant their yards to bring wild creatures to them. You can even use a piece of the wild to keep critters away. There's no denying that humans, for good and bad, are a part of wild Arizona. In the wild landscape of Arizona, one of the region's most recent dwellers is people. Since the arrival of human beings, a sort of dance has evolved to balance the intricate interactions between plants, animals, and people. There are upsides and downsides to the newcomers, but there's no escaping the new reality. Take this tiny creature, for example.
Hummingbirds are just amazing creatures. I mean, really, your heart beats 1,200 beats per minute? That's crazy. They're the only bird that can fly backwards. They're just jewels of the desert.
They don't flap their wings. They beat the heck out of them at more than 80 times a second. And they are the tiniest birds on the planet.
They seem so small, delicate, but they're really tenacious. I always like to say we couldn't live on the planet with them if they were any bigger than they are.
Hummingbirds live exclusively in the New World, and they live in all of it, from the bottom tip of South America up to Alaska. Not surprisingly, they spend most of their time where the climate and terrain suits them, in the jungles filled with insects and flowering plants. Only 5% of the more than 300 species make homes as far north as the United States. And some of those are just passing through. But all rely on nectar from flowers, or from humans. To get to know hummingbirds better and help protect them, Sherry Williamson and her husband Tom Wood have gently and gingerly researched them for more than 20 years.
Aren't you gorgeous? Okay, you need to fold up for me, though. All right, so he does not have a band. Banding hummingbirds is almost like taking a human census. The only way to really get a sense of what's going on with the population is to know the individuals within that population. Yeah, there's a real good chance. Putting those uniquely numbered bands on those birds, we get to know them as individuals. That way, if we recapture them at the same site or at a different site nearby, or if somebody else captures them, you know, sometimes 1,000 or more miles away, then we know that individual and we know something of its history. He's completely smoothed out that bill. All those little wrinkles in the bill where it was still growing have filled in. Since that original banding session in August of 1995, we've been banding on a weekly basis in April and May, and then from July through September for every year since then. So we feel like we're finally getting enough data under different weather conditions to help to filter out what's just short-term weather changes versus what's long-term climate-implicated changes. Okay, we ready? Okay, voila. We get the band on, and then we start the measurements. We start with the bill length, which tells us a bit about how the bird's bill fits the flowers that it may be feeding on. The bird's weight fluctuates a lot. 3.5 grams. And what is this back? That weight can vary dramatically depending on whether it's a female with a developing egg in her belly, whether it's a bird that's migrating. Some of these birds are doubling their body weight during migration. Oh, wait. The females, we do a little obstetric exam on them. We check them to see if they're in breeding condition. We gently blow back the feathers on their abdomens to see if they have a developing egg.
So just stay nice and relaxed. And we'll see if he wants to visit for a minute. Boys are looking for the girls, and the girls are looking to nest. They're not always that mellow.
No, it's the best! Even before there's a chance of laying an egg, Mom plans for a safe place to raise the new family. The male, not one to be tied down, heads off after mating in search of new romantic opportunities. All this happens up close and personal at the Arizona Sonora Desert Museum in Tucson. A hummingbird aviary there allows humans an intimate glimpse of the magical birds and their nests.
It is amazing to watch these guys make their nests, and we kind of cheat in here. We put poodle down in to help them out. And we also will place spider webs in here. It takes them about a week to build a nest, and they actually start building before breeding. We'll feed them, even when they fledge, which means leaving the nest, they'll still feed. Then she'll make another nest, or use the same nest, or pilfer from another bird's nest, and then have another clutch.
While it's worth the trip to see them in the aviary, you don't necessarily need to travel to enjoy hummingbirds. It takes a lot of calories to be a hummer, a fact that many homeowners have taken note of.
Hummingbirds are a group of species that people can help. If we plant gardens, especially if we plant our native plants and create little oases for them, we put out feeders and we maintain those feeders properly, the birds will benefit from that.
I've moved a few tons of rock and laid a few tons of bricks, but it's not work, it was fun doing it.
Providing an urban oasis for these flying gems doesn't require moving tons of anything. It can be as simple as planting a couple plants and hanging a few feeders. But the more you do, the more you can see and enjoy, and the more nutritious it is for the hummers.
When we were developing our landscape, it was to supplement what the hummingbirds could get through their feeders. It was a little bit like a quick energy, almost like grabbing a Snickers bar. So we learned to plant the type of flower species that are a natural nectar source and are broader in their nutrient value, as well as the little gnats and insects and so on that they pick up for their protein source.
The natural area habitat is depleting. So due to capital development, due to agriculture, due to the consistent overuse of water, birds are running out of a place to go to sustain for nesting, for habitat, for food. So when we provide that opportunity in our backyards, we are giving birds a haven, a natural haven or home for them to go and thrive.
I encourage everyone to do it. I mean, take the time to plant the types of plants that the birds like, and the insects, they all go hand in hand.
When you are using native plants, you are planting to support your local ecosystem. So desert plants here in the Sonoran region require less water. Specifically for hummingbirds, the color of the flowers, the yellow, the red, the hummingbirds are attracted to that specific color. And then they are pollinators. So they work with their beaks and their tongues to suck the nectar out of specific plants to help those plants reproduce.
I feel lucky to be able to stop in my tracks and enjoy their acrobatics and natural behaviors. They're just very alluring and attractive.
They're a physiologic marvel. I mean, they can fly backwards. Their wing speed is so fast. They have a heart rate that's out of sight. The colors are spectacular. So yeah, they're mesmerizing in that respect.
And I really feel strongly that as people who can enjoy this little slice of the natural world, that it's our responsibility to be good stewards and support this wonderful habitat around us.
One statuesque native plant that grows only in the southwestern deserts and is friendly to the hummers is the Ocotillo. Its red tubular flowers bloom right when many migratory species are passing through on their way north. But don't call it a cactus. It's a version of a succulent.
Ocotillos bloom usually in the spring, sometimes late winter. The lower elevations probably start in February and March, mid-elevations March through April, and the higher elevations April and May. I would say they could probably get up in the range of 20 feet or so, some of the biggest ones. Often they're much shorter. The flowers are on the terminal ends of the stems, so once the flowering spike is finished, the seeds come off, and that will dry up and fall off, and then the next year's stem growth will come off at the end of that. Our local Ocotillo has a huge range. It goes all the way to northwestern Arizona, almost up into Utah. It goes to the southern Mojave Desert in California, Palm Springs area. It dips down into Baja, and it goes down clear into central Mexico and east clear to the Big Bend area of Texas, mostly below 5,000 feet.
The Ocotillo has figured out how to deal with the desert's finicky rainfall, no matter the time of year.
We've got a plant that can put on leaves when there's moisture. It photosynthesizes, does its thing. If it dries out, drops those leaves, rains again, on come the leaves. They can do this 2, 3, 4 times a year. Metabolism of this plant is never fully shut down in the dry weather. It's idling, and when the rains hit, it can be in full leaf in 48 hours. Ocotillos are very drought tolerant, but they grow in some of the driest parts of the Sonoran Desert, down near the coast in Baja California, where there's 2 to 3 inches of rain a year.
A member of the Ocotillo family that's found in Baja California, Mexico, is as bizarre looking as its name suggests, boojum. Resembling an upside-down carrot, the boojum is found almost exclusively on the Baja Peninsula. Thanks to isolation and differences in its structure, this species doesn't face all of the same threats its cousins do.
The greatest impact on Ocotillos actually comes from collecting the plants, and not so much here in Arizona. Texas, New Mexico, Mexico is where they have serious impact on harvesting plants. Where the problems come in with Ocotillo fencing might be if the plant is entirely cut to the ground. And even that, if it's done right, the plant can recover from. So it depends a little bit on who's doing it and how they're doing it as far as the fencing goes. They can be sustainably harvested. However, the survivability of fencing, as is the case with plants as well, is not great. People tend to think you can just cut it, stick it in the ground, and walk away from it. That's what I hear a lot, and you can't.
One possible solution to the detrimental harvesting of Ocotillos is to grow them sustainably instead of chopping them down in the wild. But finding enough cultivated Ocotillos is tough. Most nurseries don't grow any. And for those that do, patience is required. It takes a couple of years to grow an Ocotillo just a few feet into 5-gallon containers. For such a majestic and tall plant, it couldn't have a humbler beginning. Yes, each of those tiny snowflakes is an Ocotillo seed.
So we grow them from seed, and they'll be 12 inches to 15 inches tall, usually with a couple of branches. And then after that first year, sometimes at the end of that first year, we put them up into 5-gallon pots. We currently have about maybe 4,000. And for the 1 gallons, we have space for maybe 8,000.
It's not just planting a fence or hanging a feeder. People can affect nature without meaning to, especially with one of the Sonoran Desert's newest and interesting additions.
The collared peccary, or the javelina as we call it locally, in Arizona is really a more recent phenomenon. And when you look at archaeological records of Native Americans and what things they were eating, there's no record of javelina in Arizona prior to 1700. Javelina and all pecaries evolved in North America millions and millions of years ago, and it was only about 3 million years ago that when the connection between North and South America was established, they invaded South America, became well established in South America and Central America, and really died out in North America after the Pleistocene. A javelina is a pig-like animal, but not exactly in the pig family, so it's not like it's a completely different beast. It comes up the east side of the Mexican coast and the west side of the Mexican coast. So in the U.S. it occurs in Texas and Arizona, and it's expanding its range northward recently. I think it's cold weather that prevents it going north much further than it is. Most animals have long guard hairs and then a woolly underfur that comes in cold weather and then disappears in the summer. Javelinas just have those long guard hairs, so they don't have the insulation that they would need to persist for a long time in a really cold climate. The scent gland is a really unusual thing for a large mammal like that. You would think with an animal that has such a great sense of smell, they wouldn't stink so much. But those scent glands are used for social communication and marking their territory. So they'll actually rub on rocks to mark the territory of that group. And so they exist in herds. And in those herds, they'll rub against each other to rub that oily exudate from the scent gland. And that's just a way of getting to know each other, being able to recognize each other. If you look at those individuals in each one of those herds, they're definitely a related, multi-generational kind of family pack. Javelina eat a lot of succulent, not so much grass eaters, but they'll eat a lot of prickly pear pads, which is remarkable when you think that they just bite into a spiny prickly pear pad, chomp down, and then they pull out. They're really omnivores. They'll eat insects, they'll eat snakes, they'll snatch little lizards, they'll snatch little mammals if they can, but really most of their diet is vegetative material.
Those succulents and those flowers, and generally anything that's not native is going to be highly sought after. It's different from what they can get anywhere else. So those ornamental type plants are going to be a big draw for Javelina.
That draw can lead to unexpected and possibly unwanted encounters. Many recent Arizona residents plant their yards with reminders of their previous homes. They want to bring lush greenness and color to their yard. But if they aren't careful, it just opens up a tempting new menu for local wildlife. The Arizona Game and Fish Department has experience with this conflict and tries to help sort it out.
When people call me, we discuss what's going on their property, and I can help them sort out and figure out the underlying cause for increased wildlife presence at their home. And then they can go and deal with those inherent causes which will affect wildlife behavior. People love to watch wildlife, and it is a treat. You know, a lot of people, I think, maybe naively think, oh, this is great, I love quail, I'm going to put out a quail block and, you know, enjoy watching these animals, you know, which can be quite rewarding. However, that seed, of course, is a food source for lots of different things. And, you know, when the birds have all gone to bed, it's, you know, the rodents come out and they're eating. And then the rattlesnakes are out there waiting for the rodents. And, you know, Javelina love birdseed. That's a big part of my job, is helping people realize that they have the tools necessary to resolve these conflicts. For Javelina, you would want to do your gardening in an enclosed area, so more like a backyard that has a wall around it where you could do your composting and your gardening and so on. You know, if you're committed to having that, you know, flash of color in the front and you love your petunias, then maybe hanging baskets. Essentially anything that's going to keep what the Javelina are interested in out of their reach.
And Javelina have a special affinity for what much of city dwellers get rid of: their garbage.
So if they are getting into garbage cans during the week, then it's just a matter of securing those trash cans, either putting them in a garage, tying them to a carport or a tree or something like that, putting them in a backyard behind a wall. What we recommend is always, for the day of collection, get up early that morning and put them out at the curb. Don't put them out the night before. Most commonly, when people are having a conflict with wildlife, the first idea that comes to mind is to remove that wildlife, and they view that as a solution. However, if everything remains the same, the attractants that are causing that animal to have increased presence and to remain in the area, to come back habitually and frequently, are going to be there for future animals. The key to resolving conflict is to remove the attractants, not to try to move wildlife around and shuffle them to places where people think might be more appropriate.
Although rare, there's another type of human-javelina interaction that's even more consequential. It has to do with javelina physiology and natural instinct. And also for defense.
Javelina eyesight's actually pretty poor. So if you think about an animal that evolved in the thick thorn scrub and never really needed to see more than 50 or 100 yards in front of them, their hearing is probably average. They have small ears, so you can see they don't have like big mule deer ears that might indicate really good hearing at long distances. So probably average hearing, and their smell is very, very good. They have that pig nose, and a lot of what they do is rooting for plants and finding food and detecting danger with their sense of smell. So that's very well developed. So the teeth that they have are large tusks, and probably, of course, didn't evolve as meat eaters like you would normally associate those big canines. They probably evolved more for defense, fighting, male fighting, for female breeding. Anything that's kind of a member of the dog family or cat family is going to look like a predator to them, which is where we get into trouble in a kind of an urban environment when people are walking their dog and they come across a javelina. That javelina sees that dog no different than a Mexican wolf or a coyote, and it acts accordingly.
People should be aware of their surroundings, and that means, not being oblivious on phones, with plugged into music, that kind of thing. Really, awareness, vigilance, and avoidance is the best thing that dog owners can do when they're out walking.
Not all wildlife encounters are to be avoided. Some people seek them out, and with good reason.
I want to see a roadrunner sometime while I'm out here.
Learning and even adventure await, with just a book or an app, a pair of binoculars, and maybe some newfound friends.
We have a little bit more feeders scattered throughout the yard, but they still are concentrated along the back wall of the house.
The rewards of birding are many, and not far away at all.
Violet-crowned is at the tube feeder, now flew over the house. So
if you want to add a new dimension to your existence that is full of music and color and excitement and drama, become a bird watcher.
Another nice look at a black-chin hummingbird male over at feeder Z on the right-hand side.
The birds that you watch may be elegant, elusive, common, or rare, and even raptorial. At home with water or comfortable in cactus, any birds can be inspirational.
They're so tiny, they're so feisty, they defend their territory. We don't have them in England, for one thing, and so that was the first bird that got me interested in birding.
Birders are the most welcoming, warm, engaging people.
And I'm an SOB, spouse of a bird.
When you're a brand new bird watcher and you're just starting out, the best thing is to get with other people who are more experienced than you are.
Yeah, look at the body. If you see brown streaking, it's going to be a house finch.
Okay. It's exciting seeing new birds. It's just great visiting different places and seeing different birds there.
I think we saw magnificence, didn't we, at your place?
Yeah.
That's what I remember.
Birders come from all walks of life. Birding is actually kind of hip now. I won't say we're fashionable, like you're never going to see us walking down the runway in Milan at the big fashion show. But, you know, it's not just the stereotype anymore, and that's really good for birding.
And they're everywhere, and I think that's another big part of it, that almost everywhere you go, you might not have grizzly bears or polar bears or, you know, big cats or things like that, but birds are pretty much everywhere you go.
Oh, there he is. Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. The violet crown right up here. You can make a joke about bird nerd. I don't mind it. You can call me a bird nerd all day. I love them. You hear that, Patak? Patak, that's the summer tanager, yeah. It's not expensive. You can do it anywhere.
I think that's one of the exciting things about birding in Arizona, especially if you're near a riparian area and there's a variety of trees, you get to see an incredible variety of birds.
Whether your experiences with the wild are on your home turf or in the field, intentional or inadvertent, there's no question there's potential for a powerful impact. And it can come with significant mutual benefit on a global scale.
If you're a bird watcher, you can't help but care about the world. I actually believe that bird watching can save the planet because we're out there, we're vocal. I just want to get us more mobilized and more together so we're acting as a force for good and for preservation because, I mean, I want my kids and grandkids to be able to do what I've done.
Keep going.